Space. Since I was a little girl, I've been utterly fascinated with it. The stars, the planets, the unknown, its beauty and mystery. When I was younger, I used to lay out on our deck and just watch the stars for hours. The vast blackness with its dots of light were so intriguing. It was almost calling to me. I was so enthralled with space, I decided at the ripe old age of 10, I was going to be an astronaut. I went to space camp for 2 years at a place very much like this one, our Air and Space Museum of Tulsa. One of the years included an amazing trip to Kennedy Space Center in Houston. At space camp, I learned everything there was to know about space travel, the past, current, and future of NASA. Many of you were lucky enough to be alive and well when the space race began in 1957 between America and Russia. I bet you can remember the feeling when the first American, Alan Shepard, was launched into space in 1962. That year, JFK stood before a crowd at Rice University and declared America's stand in the race.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
After Mercury came Gemini, and after Gemini, Apollo. NASA used each flight into space as a learning pad, and with each success, kept building on it with new rockets, longer space travel times, all aimed towards the monumental goal of landing on the moon. And finally, on the 11th Apollo mission, the task was completed when Neil Armstrong took that one small step for man, but that one giant leap for mankind onto the moon's surface. When the first few astronauts and engineers started the space program, I can only imagine them thinking how far off getting to the moon must have felt. Not just in distance, but in technology they had to get there. To be those chosen to make the first steps into the unknown had to be scary, nearly daunting. Not unlike the task of John the Baptist. He was given the task of paving the way for the Messiah, for Jesus. Let's read Zechariah's prophetic song in Luke chapter 1, starting in verse 68. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago, salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. In this first paragraph, Zechariah, filled with the Holy Spirit, is prophesying about Jesus, about how God raised up a horn in the house of David, how he will rescue us from the enemies, allowing us to serve him without fear. But then, Zechariah gets to talking about his own son, the trailblazer, John the Baptist. Verse 76, "And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him." John was called to prepare the way for Jesus, but how? Verse 77, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins. Verse 78, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace. As we look at this passage, and the path John was supposed to lead folks down, it's the path you find yourself on today. You have been called to shine the light here on earth, to lead people in the darkness as we wait for Jesus to return. But you don't have to start from scratch, and you don't have to go alone. Just like NASA used a team of people and built its space program one rocket at a time, God is creating a kingdom, one generation at a time, each building on the legacy before them. That means we have centuries of Christians who walk before us on this path. John's mission was to get those of his day to the death of our Messiah. The disciples later in Matthew were given the Great Commission. 28:19 says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." But we are called to build on that mission, to get those living in the darkness around us to the hope and the peace that lies in the second coming of Jesus Christ. 1 Peter 2:21 says, "For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps." So how do we do that? By simply sharing the good news with everyone around us. It's my hope that you use this Advent season to energize the mission God has sent us on. Volunteer to feed the homeless. Sign up to purchase gifts for kids in need. Make cookies for your neighbors. There are so many ways that you can be a light this season. Doing anything, even something simple, is much better than waiting dormant for Christ's return. We must show folks the way to his peace through his message. Be that light in the darkness. Don't let the mission end with you.